I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. The date is the 30th of January. The time is 3 o'clock. With us today, we have Alderman Tolliver, we have Alderwoman Bade, Alderman Warman, Alderman Bugg, and myself, Alderman Franco. First item is approval of the minutes, 25-0066. Approval of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held on January 16, 2025. A motion by Alderman Bugg, second by Alderwoman Bade. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Madam Clerk, anybody from the public wishing to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay. Next item then is 25-0083, an ordinance reserving 2025 volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues and related matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Minnick, Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer. Enclosed in the packets today is an ordinance to retain the city's private activity bond volume cap for calendar year 2025. Under IRS rules, bonds can be issued on for certain purposes, private development activities, on a tax-exempt basis. So in other words, the interest costs are a little lower for the borrowers for economic development purposes on these particular bonds to enable or to incentivize the development of certain types of development. Typically, they advance public economic development purposes and take the form of industrial revenue bonds or single or multifamily mortgage revenue bonds. Each year, the city must pass an ordinance reserving and retaining its private activity bond limit, referred to as volume cap, or that volume cap will revert back to the state of Illinois in May. The city's volume cap for 2025 is approximately $23.1 million based on its population and on an amount of $130 per resident. Passage of the ordinance would allow the city the maximum flexibility to utilize its volume cap in conjunction with eligible projects should any arise during 2025. This is an item that you've seen before. We typically pass one of these ordinances each and every year, and staff does recommend approval to maintain that flexibility to respond to projects if and as they might arise. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Warman, second by Alderman Bugg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item is 25-0028, a resolution to approve an amendment to an agreement with Wesley United Methodist Church in the amount of $37,000.
Good afternoon, Martha Paschke, Director of Innovation and Strategy. Before you is a resolution to amend the current contract with Wesley United Methodist Church for the hosting and operating of the temporary warming center. Our original contract with them covered a total of an anticipated 30 nights, which they have already opened for. So in anticipation of potentially more cold nights, bad weather nights that meet our criteria of sustained temperatures under 15 degrees or wind chill of 20 with precipitation. We are asking to amend that contract with an additional potential for $37,000 depending on how many nights need to get used. EMA gave us an estimate of potentially 25, so that's what we based that on under the current contract.
Questions or comments? I have a question. So what is our metric for when we do it temperature-wise?
Yes, so that is sustained temperatures of 15 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, in the overnight period. So not just dipping to 15, but sustained temperatures at 15 or below. And then it's, I believe, a wind chill of 20 with precipitation. So I believe that was 2 inches of snow or sustained precipitation for over an hour solid.
Okay. And the reason I ask is that this winter doesn't seem any different than any other winter. It really doesn't. I mean, we get our cold snaps in January and maybe some in December. We get a couple in February too. So I don't know how the estimate was originally done on how many nights, but it doesn't seem like we're proportionally out of, based on what normal, but I don't have any facts and data, but normal winters are kind of like this anyway. So I was kind of surprised that we ran out, that we didn't do more based on historical data, but, I was.
Yeah, previous years, so last year before the city closed, we had only opened 10 nights. and the years leading up to that, which were used to calculate this.
Okay.
I believe it was around 20
Okay.
average. It was anticipated as a La Nina year that this year we would need more nights, so that's why EMA gauged 30 to
Right.
start, and we were all very surprised that we started approaching 30 faster than we thought. So January up through January 24th, they had to open every night but 2.
Okay. All right.
So that was actually kind of surprising.
I'm just wondering if the other years were the outliers and this is the normal one. Because, being around this area for a long time, like, we get cold January nights like every single night. So I was a little surprised. But if you're going in the last couple of years, that would make sense because it was a little bit better. So, okay, I was just curious about that.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Motion by Alderwoman Baden. Second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is 25-0059, a resolution authorizing Director of Purchasing to enter into an agreement with Matrix Consulting Group in the amount not to exceed $141,080 for a staffing and strategic planning study for the Aurora Police Department.
Good afternoon, Committee Chairman. Lieutenant Bill Rowley, Administrative Services Lieutenant for the Police Department. I have a few things I want to make sure that I highlight with you this afternoon. First, just a brief history for the record. The Police Department has been working over the past couple of years to assess our organization's staffing needs, including our appropriate staffing levels, allocation, assignment, and deployment of our resources, including our personnel. Through various organized and informal surveys, the Police Department has learned that the overwhelming feedback from the community, of course, is the demand for more police officers and greater officer presence in the neighborhoods. Part of this assessment not only asks about staffing numbers, but it seeks to enhance the deployment of personnel in the most efficient and impactful manner. With the assistance of the city's purchasing division, Matrix Consulting Group was selected to perform a multitask analysis project, which will include various tasks, and I'd like to just highlight them for you here. I know that you all received a rather lengthy set of attachments along with this resolution proposal. But I wanted just to make sure that I just hit the high points here. This is a multitask approach that begins with project initiation. That's going to be an initial understanding of our department and our service environment. That's going to include seeking input from city leaders and other stakeholders within the city, and they'll sort of get a holistic view of the city and its needs regarding public safety, and particularly the police department. Then they're going to move on and receive community and employee stakeholder input. That includes various surveys of the staff members at the Aurora Police Department and other community stakeholders. They're going to hold community meetings and garner responses from that. From there, they plan to provide a descriptive profile of the police department. That's sort of an overview of the Aurora Police Department, our service levels, our staffing and service environment. From there, they're going to conduct a comparative evaluation of the police department compared to best practice and peer agencies, basically see what we're doing compared to other agencies around us and national best practices in our similar organizations. Their fifth task is they're going to do an analysis of our workload and our staffing. This will be a comprehensive analysis. I know that frequently folks talk about per capita, how many police officers you need per 1,000 in a typical city. This is meant to expand well beyond that, and it's going to be based on workload, staffing needs outside of just raw numbers. That's also going to include things like what time of day and what day of week our staffing needs are the greatest. There's heat mapping, calls for service, analysis of our CAD, things like that. They're also going to take into account a projection of our future service demands and staffing needs as the city continues to grow, and anticipate what future service needs we're able to provide to the city. And then once they're done with that, they're going to create a final synopsis and develop a final report. That report's going to be made available to the City Council at large and also to any other stakeholders that are interested in seeing and taking a look at that. This proposed schedule, we anticipate, Matrix Consulting Group has indicated this should take about 5 months, and they've outlined a timeline accordingly in their proposal. And as for the numbers, they've offered to us a total cost of $134,632. That includes an optional task, which we'd like to endeavor, of beat design. As you're probably aware, we operate in a similar fashion as wards are compartmentalized. We have a police beat system where we, years and years and years ago, we divided up the city into police beats based on the geography and calls for service at that time. We think it's high time we take another look at that and see if perhaps our geography, population, and our calls for service need to see a realignment. That's an additional cost of $19,632 and is built into that final cost of $134,632. So I'm here before you today to seek your approval for us to enter into that contract with Matrix Consulting Group, and I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Questions or comments for the committee?
Yeah,
Alderman Booker.
thank you. Yeah, I have a couple questions. First, on the history, when was the last time we did a staffing study?
I've been with the Aurora Police Department going on 28 years. To my knowledge, we've not done one since I've been here. I don't know beyond, say, 30 years ago. I don't know that
Okay.
we've done one. Not a formal one.
Maybe AA. We did an abbreviated one like in 15, something like that?
Alex Alexandru, Chief Management Officer. That was a very limited.
Right, right.
It was nowhere near this. So,
Right.
So to answer your question, we have never done this caliber of staffing study that I'm aware of, and even when I was here 25 years ago, I had access to files in the PD, and there was no record of anything prior to that.
Right, but the small one we did was about 15, right? 2015?
Roughly.
About, okay.
Yeah.
My second question on this, we have the ranking of 2 firms. Were there more, and just these 2 were selected to do the interview process, or were there only 2 who came out?
There were more than 2 that came out, but through the normal procurement process, through the RFQ, we whittled those down to 2 and conducted the necessary ranking, and that's how we ultimately landed on Matrix.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions.
If I could add, Alderman, it was a very intensive, it was one of the more intensive vettings, because I was involved, we had a cross-section from the department, so we really ran both of these folks through a couple hours minimum, and both were very competent, very responsive, but at the end of the day, the one being recommended really kind of won the day with their approach, and we checked references, and so I really kind of at that point, looked at the command staff and said, all right, are we comfortable? And they said, absolutely. And that's when we decided to bring
Yeah,
it forward.
excellent. About how many put in the application packet? We whittled it down to 2, but was it like,
I believe it was 5.
okay, that's a good number. Okay. I don't have any other questions. I got a quick comment, though, and everything just falls upon itself. When Mr. Minnick was up here, and I read in the first line that we're estimating things off a population of 177,000, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so now we go into this study, and people are going to say, well, you need to staff for 177,000, which, like I said, is ridiculous. So people need to know that ahead of time. This special census that we're going to do eventually is so important to get true numbers so we can employ and activate the right number of people in really all our departments, but especially police, fire, and et cetera. So, thank you.
So in the conversations we had, we made it crystal clear that this is not a point-in-time study based on some flawed number, but I think they put in the 177 because they said that was just a data point they grabbed off of the Census Bureau. But we made it crystal clear that we are not undertaking this study just for today. This is a future state. So 250,000, continued growth, southwest, southeast sides fully built out, pretend that the far west side all gets built out. So we really want to make this as robust and predictive for us as possible. The other towns we checked with, the other departments, they got the most value taking that approach. So it wasn't, you know, I mean, we're not just looking to do an assessment for today, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Motion to approve.
It would appear that the fact that you mentioned the details are going to go into a little bit deeper than just how many people per thousand will probably prove that, wow, you guys are working really hard for 177,000. It's almost like you got 220,000 in your city. That would be great to have if they could quote that, because we send that right into, because really what we're going to find out is we got more than they thought, and this may prove it for us, the different metrics they're going to use. So I think that's a good thing. It would be wonderful. So thank you for that. And we do have a motion by
Second.
Alderwoman Bate and a second by Alderman Bug. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item is 25-0082, resolution authorizing the chief financial officer of the city to execute an agreement for ambulance billing services with EMS management and consultants.
Thank you. Chris Minnick, Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer again. Back in 2008, the city entered into a contract with Andres Billing Services for ambulance billing services. Andres would take information that was provided by the Aurora Fire Department and the Finance Department and would send bills to the relevant governmental agencies and third-party insurers for ambulance runs and services. During 2024, Andres was acquired by EMS Management and Consulting, or EMS-MC. EMS-MC assumed the city's contract and continued to provide ambulance billing services based on the terms of the Andres contract that they had assumed, that the date of that contract, again, being back in 2008. At the same time as that changeover was happening, the city and EMS-MC have been working on a new billing agreement to update the terms and the conditions of the business arrangement. In the packet today is a proposed updated agreement for a 12-month period ending February 28th, 2026. Services provided would be comparable to those provided by Andres and ESMC up to this date, and would involve billing government agencies and relevant third-party insurers for ambulance services provided by AFD. One key change in the proposed agreement is a cost reduction. The current agreement calls for a 5% fee based on net collections of ambulance revenues from the billings that they collect. Under the new fee proposed, the agreement and the fee would equal 4%. Currently, we pay approximately $250,000 annually for these services, and so therefore we anticipate that the fee reduction would equate to approximately $50,000 annually based on the current billing and collection volumes. We also anticipate that over the next 2 years, the city staff from finance and the Aurora Fire Department would undertake a competitive process for these services to make sure that we are utilizing the best value vendor for the ambulance billing services. Staff does recommend approval, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions or comments for the committee? I got a question for you, real quick. So we're going from 5% to 4%.
Correct.
Do we know any surrounding towns, what they may be, what their percentage may be, or?
We did not do a survey of those. I think that would be part of the competitive process that we would be looking to undertake. Right now, we wanted to get the agreement and the agreement terms updated to reflect the current billing practices and the current arrangement with EMSMC, but that would be part of an evaluation of the overall.
Do we feel that the 4% is probably similar to other, I mean, ballparkish for everybody else?
I believe that it probably is. I know we have informally gotten calls over the years, and when they heard even the 5% arrangement that we had with Andres, many vendors would indicate that they couldn't touch that.
Okay, all right, good. All right.
Motion to approve.
We got a motion approved by Alderwoman Bay.
Second.
Second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is 25-0090, resolution authorizing a redevelopment agreement between the City of Aurora and JH Real Estate Partners, LLC, for the redevelopment of the property located at 2 South Broadway, commonly known as the Aurora National Bank Building.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. David Debo, Director of Economic Development. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction for this item and the next couple of items.
Would you like me to read all those items, and then you can
I
talk
think that would
about them
be-
all? Would that be
I think
better
it'd
for
be a
you
great
guys?
idea. Yes.
Okay, so all right, well, there's one. The next one we'll be looking at is 25-0092, a resolution authorizing a redevelopment agreement, RDA, between the City of Aurora and JH Real Estate Partners for the redevelopment of property located at 62 South Broadway, commonly known as the Franz Building, and vacant lot located at 66 South Broadway. You are gonna recuse yourself on the following one? 0093? So we'll just stop there, because when I'll bring that one up because Alderman has to recuse himself, so we'll just start with those
Right,
two.
and my comments are going to be very general first as an introduction, and then Marty Lyon's going to go
Okay.
into
And then
detail,
we'll-
and I
then
think
we'll-
that's when,
Yeah, then we'll address that one separately, given the generic thing you're gonna tell us, and we'll have Alderman
Makes
Mormon,
sense.
recuse himself.
perfect,
Okay.
makes sense. I just wanted to introduce the process because Marty Lyons, who's here behind me, and for those who don't know him, Marty Lyons was the ex-CFO of the city and now does consulting work for us on a project-by-project basis when we're dealing with a fairly rigorous issue, as we are here today. So just briefly, we're here to talk about 3 RDAs, and the reason why we're bringing them in at the same time is the similarities that they are all downtown, they are all historic buildings, and they are all looking to be reused from their current use to a use that's residential. So that's the similarity. It's a fairly significant group of properties. Just to put it in perspective, when we did the original 4, the terminal, the Keystone, and the Hobbs, and 80 South River, altogether those properties had probably about 110 units. We're almost talking about 90 units just for these 3 today. So it's kind of similar as well. And that, of course, doesn't include DAC and the other things. The way we're able to do these deals is because we take advantage of the historic tax credits. So, of course, we need developers who are facile with that fairly sophisticated process. And we're fortunate that rents have risen significantly in the city. And I will say that that was something that we talked to you about 6 or 7 years ago. And we said, in order for this market to work, we've got to have rents that some way reflect the costs of the project. If not, we talked a lot about the gap. The gap we always defined as where the costs were here, but the value was here. So at the end of the day, nobody was going to do it. What you're going to see today is how that gap has shrunk significantly. There is still somewhat of a gap, and the gap is because even though rents have risen significantly, costs since 2018, construction costs have gone up about 40%. So even though we've made great strides, and the result of the great strides is you'll see a much different kind of incentive ask today than we've had before. But the reason that we're here at all and not having no incentive at all is because the gap still exists. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marty Lyons, and we could do it one by one.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, and for those of you that I know, it's a pleasure to see you all again. Alderman Tolliver, I'd be happy to take the time to give you a 1-minute bio, and everyone on the committee knows that it wouldn't be 1 minute, so but I would try and be as brief as possible. So pleasure to be here and address these issues. Okay, I put the remote right here. Who took the remote? I had it right up here. So as Mr. Debo pointed out, the gap that he referred to, and that is revenues to do a project and also revenues to run a project after it's done. Those have not have gone up, but so has the expenses related there too. So I wish I could say that we don't have any gaps, but as we'll go through this process, and for some of you that were here during the 1920 projects, you'll see the lack of grants. And we don't even like to use the term forgivable loan because we're always going to find a revenue source that is new, not something that is coming from somewhere else, or not just something that is a write-off. So we're looking at new revenue sources to pay back a given incentive. That way we can say earnestly that this is not impacting an Aurora taxpayer. So with that said, we have, and I will not discuss 251. This is the projects, and this, fortunately, I did do it this way. So I think it's really important to see what Hobbs looked like and what it looks like today. We're almost completely done. I understand we have one restaurant that's still in process, but and it is fully leased up. So that's fantastic. Still have a lot of interest in downtown properties. We have increases in rents that are very evident from the 4 projects that Mr. Debo referenced, and I'm going to show a chart on that. We have projections of new rents for the projects we'll talk about today with higher rents than what we had before. The apartments are fully leased, and in some cases, when you put those two things together, you say, why do you need any incentive? Because the costs keep going up as well. It's one thing to have that revenue side going up, it's just those costs continue to rise. So in some areas they've slowed. Our costs that I calculated for some of our projects are actually went up by a lesser amount than what we see on a national average, because Mr. Debo did some work just recently looking at index increases, and ours are a little bit less, which is nice to see. So I really, as the former CFO, and when we first started doing these deals, I can remember saying that in 5 years we want to have lower incentives. And we're at the 5-year mark, and we are going to have lower incentives. And it's not as good as we had hoped because we had COVID and a few other things that have come through. Nobody would have anticipated a year at 10% inflation just being kind of thrown in there on the side. So that was a difficulty. But we are on the right path. It's not the exact one we were supposed to be, but I think that we're very happy that we're in an environment where we have less incentives and a lot of continued interest. So with that said, I'm going to go forward one and talk about the better news first. I had these in backwards. So this is a look at, if you go all the way back to River Street, which is 2018, where it got fully leased up, it was $1.35 a square foot. Now that's a little bit skewed because those are bigger units. So the bigger the unit, sometimes the lower the cost per square foot. But then you go to 1920 and you see that we have an average going up to $1.80 a square foot. Still not enough to do the job. But where we're at now is at $2.40, $2.41. And that's great to see. And when you look at those, you can see there's some outliers. The Galena Hotel, which you all knew was a micro deal, so you have those very small units that were still commanding a decent rent. So that's why that per square foot is high. You compare that to the larger buildings, such as the 100 North Broadway, and even Hobbs, they had larger units inside the building. They were lower rents, but they're going up. And if we take the projection from 1920, so 2019, 2020, through 2025 and project it to 2030, you see we have a very competitive rent market. That's higher than we really expect our developers to say they'll do, but that's what could happen. We don't like to put that out there in an individual deal, but it's really nice to see that the possibilities are there downtown for higher rents based on actual figures. Because that center column of 2025, the top 5 or top 6, 7 are all actuals, and then the bottom 3 are projections, because those are the deals in front of us. So I'm going to go back. The costs, we look at the per square foot basis, and again, this can be variable based on the size of the unit. Picture it. If you have 30 units in a small space, you've got a lot more costs, if you will, lots more walls, more toilets, more everything, compared to a larger space that might be able to command more revenue for less costs. So the short of it is we have the same kind of a chart. And this is showing a per square foot cost going up of only about 10% over that time frame, which was surprising to us for those deals. Happy that it happened and glad that it was less than the rents, but still those costs are going up. And that's why that delta between the costs going up by this amount and the revenues going up by a lot more allows us not to do grants anymore. We can close the gap by working on loans only, where we will get paid back. And it's really important, you'll see this in the last chart. When we do these charts, and I'll be happy to go over this with anyone, but we look at sources of funds and we look on investor return. So I'm going to look at our sources of funds first, and you see going across for the bank building and Franz that we don't have any COA incentive versus total sources, because this is the construction phase. What do they need to construct? What we're going to do is help them pay their loan. In the case of the bank building, $7.75 million and $2.1 million for Franz. They've got to try and pay that loan back. And when the tax increment comes in 2 to 3 years, every year, that helps to pay that loan back over time, or they can use it to give themselves back equity. But we're not in the deal up front at all for those two deals. What I think is also really important to see in those two deals is amount of input by the developer. I say input, I'm using a generic term. They have loans, equity, and tax credits that make up all the deal. And in both cases, they're taking their developer fee and saying, we will take our fee over the next 12 years. So they won't even get a fee while they're working on the project. They have to wait, and the building has to be making money to get their fee. They will have to pay their loan back before they get their fees. So I think that's incredibly important to show the commitment for those two projects. Excuse me. So the other part of the deal on the right side is that I'm going to go straight to the bottom and point out that they're thin deals, meaning that the return on equity, 4.4% and 5.3%. You know what the rate is for a treasury right now? It's not much different than that. And they're taking a lot more risk than buying a treasury bond. And we also provide a return on equity per unit, which tends to vary a little bit if they're bigger total apartment buildings versus small. And in this case, you have 30 at the bank and 10 at Franz. So they get a little bit more at Franz, but it's only 10 units. So I just want to also, oh no, I don't want to point that last one out. I'll point that out next time.
Yep.
So that's a real quick overview, excuse me. I've hit my two big things that I want to point out is that, again, we don't have any skin in the game for these two except for payment of the TIF down the road. Of these two, they go towards making our commitment to 500 units in the downtown over 5 years. So our study for growing the downtown was 500 units it could support over 5 years. This just keeps us moving in that direction. And lastly then, how did we pick these, the developer? Because it's the same developer, JH Realty. JH competed on an RFQ for Franz. We put out a detailed RFQ, laid out the building. We had only one interest besides Franz. They did not submit any information that would have qualified them. So JH did submit a qualified proposal, and so they won a competitive process. In the case of the bank building, they already own it. So they're bringing their own building to us for redevelopment. So with that said, I was going to just go into the detail of each. The bank is first, and I think those slides show a lot of what we already have. I would just say that, again, the developer is putting in the case of the bank building, 12 million, more than that. I have to read my own slide. They are putting in all of the money associated with the deal up front. And we haven't been able to say that. Usually when we bring a deal to you, we can't say that there's no money up front. Usually those go straight to the building department, go right through, get their permit, and they're done. So I think that's incredibly important that we have nothing up front. One of the things that the bank building has is that it's already inside TIF number 10. So this developer is aware that they won't get a full 23 years of repayment. The TIF clock is running. So they want to get going as quickly as possible on the bank building to take advantage of and get 19 to 20 years of tax increment if they can. In the case of Franz, we are proposing that it would be financed, that our payment is going to be a 100% TIF. We've quite often shared tax increment with the other taxing bodies. In this case, it's a small development, and what we have is a specific clause in the redevelopment agreement that states if there is one child out of these 10 apartments that is recorded, and School District 131 and the developer are to work together on that, and it is specified in the RDA, there's one child, then they owe us 10% of the increment. And if there's two children, they owe us 20% of the increment. And that will be distributed to all taxing bodies. Anything over two, it'll still be 20%. But these are fairly small units. At the Hobbs right now, the developer was comfortable with this because at the Hobbs, they have no children out of their 20-plus units.
Can I ask you, since we're talking about that, so let's just go to the TIFs real quick. Those taxing bodies, as TIFs go, are going to get the amount that they've already been getting. You're just not going to get the new increased value, correct? Okay. Why would all the taxing bodies get a 10% kickback for something that's going to a school? Why wouldn't just the school districts be there? Why would these other taxing bodies, the water reclamation and the county, why would they get 10%? Because those children, I don't think are affecting them like they would a school. You see where I'm going with that?
So the big picture is that children are a service demand for nearly all of our taxing bodies, with the exception of maybe you'd say a township. And nothing against the township, but for instance, we have police and fire, and we have police and fire pension levies, and we tax for them and to serve and protect. So when we have a child there, we're devoting services there. Parks, so we have a park district, we now have a library district, all have taxes that they would like to help support those children. So, I will leave it at that. Sometimes you will have specific deals where you just have a deal between the municipality and the school district, because the development might be really intensive on the school, and then there's other developments where there's no possibility for children at all, and so you do want to share with everybody. So I hope that answers the question.
I understand it. I'm still kind of strange to me that all these taxing bodies, there's a kid over there, I'm getting 10%. I mean, it's just schools I get, but it is what it is.
And
I just
the one thing
kind
would
of thought
say
that
is
was so
there's
strange.
also the amount of the tax bill. The township represents less than 1%.
Sure,
They are a very small percentage of the tax bill.
Okay.
So when we do these deals, as a former treasurer for the police and fire pension funds, I liked it when we got money back from the TIF and it went back around to those funds.
Sure.
Every little bit helps. I sound like a school business manager, but every little, because it helps pay for those operations.
Sure, okay. I was kind of curious about that.
And the other interesting part about those is that that if we end up with a reimbursement, I do not believe, and Mr. Minnick might be able to help me out on this, but I do not believe that that is recorded under the tax cap. So that if they get money from a TIF, it's something that goes to them, and it's not a large amount, so we're
Right,
not,
sure.
but it's not in a tax cap calculation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So that's a bonus for them
Sure. Okay.
if we do these deals.
All right.
Any questions? I'll stop and say any questions on the bank building. I haven't gone into the detail. It is 30 units. It is for floors 4 through 8. There are, and as the council, you'll probably have other opportunities from planning and zoning to see this, but it is going to be mostly one bedroom. It is a historic building, so it will get state and federal tax credits. And because of that, they're restricted on what they can do with the building layout. Corridors have to stay where they are. many of you familiar with Keystone, I think, was our biggest one that had headaches. They had huge wide hallways that we couldn't do anything about. Probably could have put another 4 or 5 units in there, but they had to keep these 10-foot wide hallways for one-bedroom apartments. That's a really wide hallway. It has the 30 units. They are right now actively renting many of the spaces, floors 1 through 4. They have leases that are all expiring on the areas where they will be constructing the new units. So that's also a reason they want to get started. They're going to lose the rents, and they did purchase this building for approximately $2 million and then put more than $1.5 million into it. So in this deal, there's what's called a basis of $4 million for the property, with then the rest of the money being for construction in the deal. And just a side note that we negotiated with them to say that they could not have a developer fee on their property. They already own the property. They don't need to earn a developer fee on the property. So instead of 10% the developer fee on the whole deal, it's 10% on the deal less $4 million of the total property price. So we've cut their the developer fee just because we want them to get paid for running the project, but not just for owning the land.
Questions, Alderwoman Bade?
So, hi Marty, nice to see you again. So first to fourth floor will still remain commercial, or
Yes.
they will also?
No,
Okay.
first, second, third.
First,
Four
second,
through
third.
eight
Fourth
will-
through eighth will be those 30 apartments.
Yes.
And for the historic tax credit, what about the external thing? There is a limitation on external changes too?
Yes.
Facade and everything?
Right. Right now, I don't believe Trevor is, oh, he's over there. Trevor, I don't believe there's any costs in the bank building for external. So the external is not. What's that? Oh, yes, except for a certain member of our staff really wants that clock working, and that's a, so it's a very nice piece of our downtown. So
Yes.
that's the only external piece.
And I had, maybe I can come back.
Okay,
If
sure,
somebody else has
sure.
questions, I can.
Anybody else have any questions at
Back
this
to
point in the presentation? All right, we can continue.
All right, the Franz is an interesting project, and we are looking at putting another restaurant in. But since we've had upstairs developments get finished before downstairs developments in all cases, we've gone to great lengths in the Franz agreement to split the first floor restaurant out from the deal. If you read through all of the information, there's quite a bit, but one part of the detail on their construction cost shows that they're going to put $560,000 into preparing the downstairs for a restaurant. And then what we have said is, then we've laid out what a new RDA will look like for the restaurant, excluding the owner, so excluding the owner of the building. So whoever they get for their restaurant, we are kind of a precursor for the new RDA that might involve sharing of food and beverage and sales tax. But it won't be available to the owner, because they're already getting a very good, in this deal, they are getting a very good rent price to help make their part of it go. So it is this restaurant space that they don't have anyone identified yet, and that's why we've kept it separate, and then 10 competitive rent apartments. And those, again, I think I referenced it already. And by the way, I didn't reference in the bank building. So the bank building states that if they have from 0 to 5 students, they have to pay 10%. And from 6 to 10 students, they have to pay 20%. And then no higher than 20%. So we have that same clause in both. That way they can have 100% of the TIF if they have no students. So back to Franz. The timing for Franz will be impacted by the creation of the TIF. What's interesting about both deals is the developer is on the risk. We use that term when we say if they want to get started sooner and we don't end up passing the TIF, we don't owe them anything. If they get started too soon and the assessed value changes because of something they did to the building. Not our concern. And that happens to, impact the tax increment. What they get that would have gone into the TIF could be smaller. So the RDA is written clearly to protect us so that if they want to get started sooner, the risk is on them, and they are fully aware of that.
I
Questions
remember
about
what
that?
I wanted to ask.
Alderman Bay.
Are there basements in these buildings?
There is a basement in the bank that is rented. There is also a basement in the Franz building that is not deemed a part of the space for the purposes of the development. So they might do a little bit of repairs down there, but I do not believe they're doing anything significant in the, it's going to remain a basement for storage, things of that nature.
Okay. And elevators, condition of elevators?
There is no elevator in Franz, I don't believe, but there's the bank building just redid their elevator at a cost of about $750,000 working
Oh,
with
expensive.
Invest Aurora on loans that they paid back.
Okay. And both of them are owned by JH Real Estate?
Yes.
Partners. Okay, that's all.
Do we,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shook my head. I should. We own Franz, and a part of the deal is it has a very long appraisal. I went through it. Appraisal that has it at $6,000. So rather than put that in and having everyone do an awful lot of tax work for nothing, it will be conveyed at a cost of $1 per the architects. Per the RDA. It includes $1 as a transfer of it, so it's not an event, and they can take possession of it. If you recall, we've had other buildings that have had very low, or some in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we called them out in the RDA sources and said, for instance, 80 South River, the old school building, school administration building, had a value of $150,000 or more, and we put that in as a part of our grant to them. So this is $6,000 that we will donate to them, the value of Franz per an appraisal.
is that $1 a cash transaction or a credit card?
I believe, well, actually, it has to
We've done
happen.
this before.
Yes, we have, but it has to, we include it in one of the other transactions. So for instance, we convey the property when they're ready to do permits.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
becomes a part of that
Okay,
process.
all right. Alderman Warman, you had a,
Just kind of a general question. So I know there's a risk in every deal. Like, what's the city's risk in this? I know, the demand has obviously increased over time. Like, what's our risk?
Well, our risk is that, we are, there could be a higher and better use, but for the most part, we really have no risks in this, and especially comparatively speaking. Before, we would always be thinking about amortizing a grant. If we'd given somebody $1 million, our risk was, we gave them $1 million. If they stayed there for 20 years, our risk was gone. They did what they were supposed to do. But every time anybody left sooner than that, we had lost that investment. Here, we don't have any upfront investment. We have opportunity costs in that our staff can be doing other things at the same time, but this is our purpose. We hope that everyone operates as efficiently as possible in both the permitting and construction process to make that happen, but we don't have any risk in either deal.
So there's no waiver of the permit fees or any of that kind of stuff? That's
No.
just a normal
No
cost of?
no waiver of permit fee. And for the schools, the land cash deals, so we run a calculation at the time of permitting that says, we think you're going to have this many students, or, so if they end up with a calculation that says they could have a student, they might owe an upfront fee. And the fee is much higher for the parks than it is for the schools.
And then, I don't,
And just to finish that.
Oh, sure.
And those are not usually a part of any of our RDAs because it's a matter of statute.
And then last question, prevailing wage or union scale, I don't know, there's no city money in this, but are they required to use prevailing wage?
So it was interesting in the last month during that conversation, our attorney has been very helpful. He referenced that when we put in general funds, prevailing wage is required. When we only have TIF funds in, it is not. And both RDAs include a requirement for prevailing wage.
So, okay, so it is a requirement in these
Yes.
agreements. Okay, great. Thank you.
A requirement that we put in
Yes.
because we felt it was the right thing to do?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Any other questions on these two? Because before we just talk about the other one, I'd like to have Alderman Warman have a chance to vote on these two. So are we prepared to address that? Is there any other questions or comments on these first two? All right, well, let's go to the first one of the two. Find out where I'm at here. So 25-0090, do we have a motion on that particular one?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Alderman Tolliver,
Second?
second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next item is 25-0092. A motion on that one?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Alderman Warman, second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 5-0 also. Okay,
Thank
now,
you very much.
now we will move on to the next one. We'll show that Alderman Warman will be recusing himself for 25-0093,
Yeah, there's-
and he may not return. This is one way straight out the door. You can escort him out. All right, so 25-0093 is a resolution authorizing execution of a redevelopment agreement with Fernando Barrero entity for the redevelopment of the property at 251 South River Street, currently a bank facility known as Company 251, into a 48-unit apartment complex.
Initially, I would like to introduce Mr. Barrero, who's here, to give a short sketch of who he is. He is an Aurora native, and I'll stop there and let him say what he would like. Please come up.
Good afternoon. I'll be really brief because I know I've given a little bit of a background about myself, a little bit about my portfolio, and especially with the current project I have going on with the Galena Hotel. So as you guys might already know, I'm a Aurora native, born and raised in the east side of Aurora. Went to Aurora Central Catholic High School. I currently own a portfolio of a little over 200 residential units, and definitely excited about this new development. Definitely a great building, great historic building in downtown Aurora. It's something that when I saw on the market, I just had to make a jump on before somebody else came in. But I think my team and I have gathered together and have the best intended use for the building. So that being said, I will let Marty take over and go over the numbers and schematics and so forth.
Does anyone have any questions, please?
I have a question. I don't know who would answer this. So we're losing Company 251 because that type of facility was not making it because we have enough of them? I mean, what was the problem with them? I mean, I know some other things, but I'm just wondering about that particular place. What's going on there?
Don't really want to speak for the owner because people sell and buy all the time for different reasons. But we did have a conversation with him, and he did mention that in his opinion, after COVID, the business changed so much. Even though maybe 20 years ago, that would have been considered a fairly non-traditional venue place compared to the place that I got married. But today, people are looking for even more esoteric places to get married. And the way he looked at the market was that maybe the business had changed. I will tell you, this was the same gentleman who was interested in doing some small venue on Prairie.
Well aware.
You're aware of it. Okay, as I was saying that, I realized that you would be aware of it. But so that was really where he was going from a business standpoint, that kind of venue.
Okay.
And this venue didn't quite fit into that.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Barrero?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay to proceed?
Yep.
So this deal is a little bit different, and I won't bury the lead. This deal requires some upfront participation. And I've left this, is that slide? Yeah, I've left this slide. If you, do you still have all of the presentations? I have all of them. We should give them to the alderman. So you can still see it on screen if you can't. Right now, to the far right, you see on the table of the first one where it says source of funds, and it shows $2 million as a City of Aurora construction loan. So I think that's important because below it, you see the blank line that says COA forgivable loan, 0. So we treat this as a loan that is, as noted in the cover letter, this is to come out of the new transformation fund. And the transformation fund, when you adopted it by resolution in 2024, says you can use this money. $9 million was delegated to the Mayor's Office of Economic Development for the purposes of loans that will be repaid. Now, this loan, to try and make the deal work, is at 2.5%. It's a little bit low on the interest, but that's because the higher the interest rate, it just gets very hard for the deal to make it. And I'm going to refer to the next thing under the investor return, the far right at the bottom. You can see that the first two deals are making 4.4 and 5.3% return on their equity. And this deal is 1.5%. It's slim. And if we had taken and said, well, we want to earn 4% on the loan, it would not have made anything. So we're trying to be a good partner here, but we're also still sticking to our guns and saying we are not going to put in any money that we will not get repaid. To that effect, in this case, this deal does not have the provision yet, and we may come back to you regarding the students. Part of the reason that it didn't have the pay 10% if so many students show up is we're getting the entire tax increment. So the city's relationship with the school is up to us to manage over the next year in the event that we decide to do any kind of an intergovernmental agreement regarding the tax increment sharing. Right now, a very large majority of the increment is needed to pay back the $2 million. So that's why the deal is written that way.
Can I ask you a question real quick? We're loaning that, the investor Aurora is loaning at 2.5%. Is 2.5% a fluid thing that a next deal could be 3% or 1% or 4%? You know, is it, or is that going to be a standard thing?
I think
At
it
least
can
in
be
the near future, I'm
fluid.
not sure.
Right now, it's about half the market rate.
Okay.
Of a, Chris, would it be fair to say half the market rate of our taxable bond? Yeah, so if we were doing a taxable bond, we'd probably be at about 5%. If they were going to the bank, it'd be 7 to 8%. And so we're at 2.5. So there is a little bit of an incentive there as we get it repaid back. So go right ahead.
Yeah, Chris Minnick, Chief Financial Officer. In fact, we are actually looking at a taxable bond issue and pricing one in the next couple of weeks, and it works out to be just about half of what we're anticipating that cost to be over that time frame.
Okay.
So at 2.5%.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
So as you can see, it's still a very slim deal. But for that loan, what we did is we've done it for a couple of other deals that we were concerned when we were up front. This has what's called a deficiency payment provision that in the event the tax increment is insufficient to make our debt service payment, the developer must come up with the difference.
Like the casino.
Exactly. So we have that provision in there to protect us. Now, the one thing we want to be good partners, if they end up with over 3 or 4 years a deficiency of $100,000, and then down the road we end up with $100,000 surplus, we're saying they can have it back. That it will be something that it will be cumulative, that we will keep track of, that if they're in a deficiency and they pay us, then great, we're covered. But if we ever get in the black on our side, we'll share it back until we're both in the black. And then then on we go. So I think it's a fair compromise. Again, the deal is tight. It also has a provision that they may not challenge the tax levy. So we will work with the assessor to set the levy at the amount in that pro forma that you have. It goes from $15,000 now to $115,000. So we will work with the assessor to get that levy to that level as quickly as possible when they are fully leased up. So this again so it's 48 units. It has different size units in there. majority is 1 bedroom smaller, but it does have 2 and 3 bedroom. So it is going to be a very interesting and I think a vibrant development. It is not what we would call in the core downtown. It is in an area, and this is one of the reasons why we went with the upfront loan besides the deal needing it, is it's what we're calling the South Warehouse District. And we are looking at trying to do a small tax increment finance around this area to try and bring that area up to date and being walkable to the downtown to help all of those restaurants, even though they're not right there. So we call it the South Warehouse District. So just like we had a first wave in the downtown, this is a first wave in that warehouse district.
Questions from the committee? You know, I was just looking in here, and I thought I read something about parking, but I'm not sure if I could find it right now. Do we know anything about
Yes, we do.
potential for park? Okay.
So what we are proposing is a 2-phase parking solution. And that is that the lot, as a part of the project, has 23 spaces. We have many units, and then there are 6 spaces on the Middle Street. Is it Middle? Middle. And then there are spaces along River. So we've already met with the planning staff to go through that to satisfy at least a 1-to-1. So that's our initial process to do that. At one point, this development was, you can see it's 14.4 million. The initial request was over $16 million because they were going to look at underground parking at this building. And we worked very hard to look at alternatives. And so it still may be in the mix that on their property, we could have a 1- or 2-story small parking deck with a minimum, but they're going to continue on with their schematics and with their design. But we wanted to be able to show that we had parking covered. So we have already talked with planning regarding the parking issue, and that's the temporary solution. So we will have signage on River that allows for overnight parking for residents in the area and on Middle. And then they will park in the lot. And I imagine they will do, it will be a part of the rent process. So that if you'd like parking on the lot, then here's your rent rate.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing to park right on the street, it's a little bit less.
Any other questions, Alderman Bate?
Thank you, Chairman. So there is a $2 million loan,
Yes,
and then that will be paid back by the increase of taxes created with this development.
yes.
And there is a TIF. So how does that work?
So we plan, for us, it takes approximately 9 months from, if you approve this today, what we will do is, at the appropriate time, is begin what's called the eligibility study, which takes 2 to 3 months. After we have an eligibility study, we start the TIF approval process, which takes almost 6 months.
Okay.
So we will have a TIF at the end of the year or first part of next year. Again, as I noted on the other 2 projects, any expenses they incur are at their own risk. And one of them, in this case, is buying the property. So buying a property, we all have houses, so when you buy and sell a house, well, the assessor knows right away. Our building permits sometimes take a little bit longer to cycle through the reassessment process. So through the deficiency payment system that we put in place, if the property changing hands has an impact on the tax increment, we are covered. So, so the TIF will be done over the next year, and we are setting up a schedule for them to go through all of their plan review and permitting, and they're going to try and time that such that they limit their risk. They really don't, they'd like, the seller wants to sell tomorrow, really antsy. So we're working out to try and say, well, we will lock up the property and pay you in January. So that it helps them to end up with helps the developer to not have a potential risk on lowering the increment and having a deficiency payment 4 years from now.
And will this be considered as a micro TIF?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal is to have it as, the one thing, I think we will examine the benefits of expanding a little bit because we know the warehouse district really needs the help. Think of the downtown in the late 80s and 90s when the first TIF was established. It was a big square block, big block that they put in that was 5 blocks on a side. We're not doing that, so I don't want that quoted in the paper. If there's a micro TIF that's larger than just right around the development, it could be a block or a block and a half, which is small down there. So we will keep it to a minimum to have the minimum impact on the other taxing bodies.
Thank you.
So, I hate to even go this route, but what if the TIF does not pass muster? Because we've had some challenges over the last few years, and we've been successful because we met all the requirements. But what would happen if the TIF didn't go through? Would the project be a no-go?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the short answer. We would also meet and confer
Oh, sure,
and do
right.
what we could
Right.
to try and figure out, for instance, the transformation fund doesn't say you have to use TIF. Could we identify another source of funds to pay it? So that's where we would go if we ended up with the TIF not being approved and moving forward. We would look at another source of revenues.
Okay.
Excuse me, Dave, but the RDA says that if there is no TIF, then we're not obligated to move ahead.
Okay, good, okay. Any other questions or comments? Alderman Bug?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Alderman Franco's question about parking a little bit. I was trying to quickly look and see here, about how far away, feet-wise, is that from this furthest south parking lot for the library?
We actually looked at, we had the map up and we were doing the meets, and so it's about 400, 500 feet to the library. It's about 200 feet to a small lot next to a pump house that we have. So we're not saying that, when we say that it's going to be a two-stage process, here's the initial solution. We would really like to look at a longer-term solution for the warehouse district for parking. Just like we have in the downtown, our lots and 2 decks scattered, we would like to end up with something on a much smaller scale down there to provide parking for restaurants that might not be able to handle it, or for or for other units where they can go ahead and say, here's my apartment, go to the city, it's this much a month, have a great day. And that's, it's a very simple process.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We got a motion by Alderman Tolliver,
Second.
second by Alderman Bade. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 4-0.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much,
Marty.
Arlen.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Next item is 25-0020, resolution authorizing approval of the spring 2025 historic preservation grants and allowing the mayor to enter into historic preservation grant agreements and addendums.
Motion to approve.
Good afternoon. This will be at, also be seen as COW and several BZ members. This is informational only, as BZ actually approved it. I do have a presentation I can go through, or if you want to just hold off to COW.
Committee? You want to see it now, or you want to see it COW? Or both? I'll leave it up to you guys. Yeah, I've already signed it yesterday, so we'll save it for, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and then we'll move on to the last item, 25-0096, a discussion on modification of the mileage reimbursement amount for the alderman. And I think, Rich, would you, on deck? Because I think that you are an important piece to this puzzle here, because you have certain aspects and historical perspectives that we could throw into the discussion. So I will let Alderman Bug, jump in initially and start the discussion, because he had brought it up, so that would be a great, good place to go.
So we discussed it at our last meeting, just kind of got our basis, our status of where we're at. I went through and reviewed and crunched some numbers, and really just a possible starting point. As we said last time, right now we're at $42 a month, which turns out to be about 2 miles a day, which we said we just hadn't reviewed this, and other than a small adjustment, in decades. So kind of crunched out an initial proposal because in a year this may, need to be changed again. But to increase the mileage to $100 a month for each alderman, that only comes out to be about 4.5 miles per day, but it's a start. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
So, is Chris Minnick still here?
Yes.
I think I'll probably need both of you up there, because I have some questions that are budgetary and then policy, process, and whole thing too. So, if we were to, because the budget process is already finished for 2025, if we were to increase, if we wanted to do what Alderman Bug mentions, is giving us basically $100 as opposed to 50, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah,
So that's
42, yeah.
Yeah, so about is that about $6,000? About $6,000 more. Is that something that we can do because we passed the budget? We'd have to make a budget amendment to that? How would that work?
We would need to handle it one of two ways. One would be the budget amendment that you just alluded to, Chairman Franco. We could also look and see if there are, we could perform a budget transfer instead of a budget amendment. So instead of simply adding to the budget, we could go through and evaluate budgeted expenditures and figure out if there was enough to make up the difference or the increment that would be generated by the change in the allowance. So that either one of those two ways, those are typically how we handle unanticipated, expenditures that that come up during the year that we didn't anticipate when we were going through the budget process.
Okay, so there's a monetary path, financial path to get there if we so desire.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're good with that. So then, Rich, my question for you is, and I know this always fluctuates, and I know that we have problem with people reporting on time, but what do we anticipate having left over in the big bucket of money for mileage at the end of the year, approximately?
Well, I don't know if Rich Jacobs, Chief of Staff, Office of Alderman, I don't know if I can give you a dollar amount. However, I will say for historic purposes, in 2023, we were over by $1,000 on our line item for mileage that is budgeted out for your mileage reimbursement. And that's when you were getting $300 per alderman for the entire year. Because of that, and working with Chris in the mayor's office, we raised that to $500 per month, $500 per alderperson per year. And last year, I'm looking to Crystal, who helps me with the budget. Last year, did we run over?
No, we were under by about $2,000.
So to anticipate, and given the last discussion at the last finance meeting, where staff will double and triple check the math that is provided, that you provide us on the forms that you fill out for reimbursement, that we're following what is in the memo from Chris about how to calculate the mileage.
Okay.
We strongly believe by following what is in basically the IRS guidelines, it's not Chris's, but the IRS, it would be not as much of an increase for each of you based on how we need to calculate it. I don't believe that any of you need more than $500 a year to calculate the mileage for us to reimburse you. I don't know until everyone turns in their information what I will have left at the end of the year. It's not a written policy. I would hope that we can encourage all of you to turn it in monthly, for sure, quarterly. It's very, very hard to do this, especially at the end of the year, calculating the fourth quarter when we have a deadline of getting things into accounting and finance to be reimbursed using 2024 funds. There have been many instances where the reimbursement for 2024, as an example, 2024 would need to be used out of the 2025 allotment because the deadline has already happened. There could be, if some people, older people chose not to turn in mileage. There are those that will only turn mileage in if they're going anywhere outside of Aurora. If they're going to the conferences or something along those lines. But then there are older people that do turn in for their daily, weekly aldermanic duties in their ward and within the city.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at here, if the bucket of money is sufficient, maybe we don't have to have more money in the bucket. Maybe we just have to rearrange how we disperse the money, how the process goes. One could be, and what probably should be, if you're not going to set it, if you're not going to do it monthly, if you're going to do it quarterly and no more than quarterly, you have a time parameter to get in quarterly, else you lose it because that's on you because of these things that we need to determine to get things into Chris and or figure out how much money we're going to have at the end of the year. It just helps us keep track of that. So, and then what I had, and Rich and I talked yesterday about this too, is that at the end of the year, I don't turn in anything. I don't care. Somebody turns in money, they turn in $600 worth throughout the course of the year, but because I didn't do anything, there's money left over. So you may not get it, but you're probably going to get it at the end of the year. Once we find out there's still money there, you're going to get yours if you spent $600 or $700 and things. So I think if you could write up a policy that maybe reflects that and bring it to us, and we could take a vet and see, will these new measures and metrics basically do what we need to do and make sure that everybody that goes someplace legitimately and turns their things in on time, there's always going to be money for them there, because we really haven't felt with the $500 that that's a problem overall. The problem is you got these things. You got, somebody turns in $600, somebody turns in none, how you figure that out. But if the pot's the pot. So if we can figure out something like that without having increased the budget and it works, I think my idea would be to try to go that way if possible. And if it doesn't work, then we just, we'll adjust at the end of the year. But I think right now we have what we need to make this work. It's just a matter of putting the pieces of the puzzle together process-wise, which will probably be a wrap committee decision. How do my colleagues feel about something along those lines?
I'm not 100% sure that aligns with the new guidelines that we set, and Rich can speak to this. So on the sheet you gave us last week, and I wasn't privy to at least one of these, or wasn't aware. So the pool, you called it, I guess, the pot.
The pool pot.
But an individual alderman is cut off on his allotment amount. If he goes over, you don't get the extra from the pool if it's not used, correct?
No, because it's split evenly.
Right.
Divided by 12.
Right. So there is no getting extra. And didn't want to go there, but we're at this point. The aldermen who live further away from City Hall, it's just a fact. So
You'll need to unlock your iPad first.
So Ward 5, 9, and 8, you are driving further. It's just a fact. When you have 3 counties instead of 1, you sometimes have obligations for your county situations. So I sometimes have to go to Joliet to go to the little county, state of the county for.
Right.
I used to go with Chuck Nelson every year. Joliet's not next door. Kendall County, that's in Yorkville. So these are just factual situations that play into this that don't align with some of the way we've just set it up. Years ago, and Sandy and I talked about this, going back and looking at our other city, Chicago, and seeing what their aldermen who live further away from downtown and how they allot for mileage. We never did it. We never really looked at it. She didn't make any calls and I didn't make any calls. We thought about it, you know, how to play that out. And with our city growing, maybe the next alderman lives in Del Webb, and that's another 2 miles south of me. Or past you, our strategic planning goes another, what, 2 miles west of you, right?
Well, they got the Aurora Airport.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, out to the Aurora Airport, so.
So I guess, so when you say that you live further away, because I just want to make sure, because I was not aware until recently that I go to these ETS meetings in Naperville, okay? It's a long drive. But I was always doing it from my home. I should have been doing it from here. So when you live far away, so let's just say that you're going to Joliet, you're using your house because it's probably closer. If you're going somewhere west of here, you're using here. So even though you're driving more, you're only allowed to. So I think one would think it might go down, right? I mean, potentially, right? Because you're supposed to utilize, and I never know, but starting yesterday, take the closest point. So maybe we won't have, I'm just guessing, maybe we won't have as much distances to go. In reality, we do, but maybe technically we don't.
If I may, you know, and perhaps maybe, and I was thinking a little bit about this in between the meetings, and perhaps it helps to think about it this way. There is what's called the normal commute. So the office being here and the aldermen each have their individual residences wherever they are. So the way I think about it and the way I used to apply it way back in prior lives when I had audits and clients that were far away from where my office was, is you drive a certain amount of mileage during a day for the business purpose. So in this case, let's just say 25 miles. You drive for city business for 25 miles in a given day, but you live 3 miles away from City Hall. So your normal commute back and forth to the office next door is 3 miles each way, so 6 miles total for the day. So if you travel 25 miles on city business in that day, what you should do is take the 25 miles, subtract off the 6 miles for the round trip, and ask for reimbursement for the 19. So I think that is a good way to kind of think about how that standard can be applied and how that can be used. And I believe you're correct in the assessment that in the case that an alderman were to drive to Joliet or Geneva or wherever for whatever kind of a county meeting that they needed to go to, you would take the total mileage driven for that day, subtract off what your normal distance for round trip to and from the office would be for that day.
When you mentioned that, though, was that into a type of structure where you get paid to go to and from work or not? Because we don't get paid coming to the office.
No,
Okay.
commute was not included. Mileage was reimbursed.
Okay, so, for example.
In my scenario.
Right,
There
for
was no
today.
additional for travel.
Right, today, nobody gets any money for coming to this meeting, for mileage. That's just our policy, that's what we do. So I'm just trying to figure out how that would work. But, so we got 3 mathematical ways to do it now, and they all seem pretty good. But for aldermen, and based on the history, we want to make it as simple as possible, because all this extra figuring things out is not good. So whatever we need to do to reduce
Yeah.
that would be wonderful. And maybe that's why some people don't turn it in. It's like, this is a lot of math here, I don't know if I want to do it. So I think going forward, if we could talk about it's good that we talked about this today a little bit. So we know there's a pathway if we need money. We do have extra money. What I would not want to see is say, okay, we're going to bump it up $6,000. We have $2,000 left over this year, and we're carrying a $6,000 or $7,000 balance every year because we're not utilizing it. You do, I do, but some people don't do it at all. So I want to be careful of that. I don't want to over budget when we're not really spending it or people aren't claiming it. So if you guys can write up an office policy a little bit along these lines, especially, and this is really what I think is important. We got to be timely when we turn stuff in. And I do it monthly, but quarterly seems fairly fair. And I would think, would you guys agree that quarterly would be appropriate? No? Why would that be?
Sometimes there are certain things that you don't have all the details, like Chicago trips or some other things, and you're waiting for like getting the parking details from somebody, and maybe, so restricting it to quarterly might be like, you miss something and you can't do it, but if it is within the year, you should be, maybe biannually should be fine.
Well, and that's, I mean, that would be up to these guys.
That
They
just,
get to work.
Rich Jacobs again, that's a little challenging if all 12 of you do that.
Right.
And then I won't know, we won't know what we will have
Right.
left at the end of the year. We can't figure it out. And I 3 months is, you know.
Well, let's just take a scenario. Let's take a real scenario. So the end of the quarter ends on December 31st, whatever quarter it is. You went to something on the 28th. You know the mileage there. Now, you may not know what the parking and everything else costs, because that could be something different, but the actual mileage that you're getting paid for is almost a different line item as opposed to other things. So you went on the 28th, you know how much mileage that was, so you could figure that out. And you don't have to have it in by the 1st of January. There's probably a grace period of a week or two after that. So basically, you got probably 2 weeks from the end of a quarter to fill that in.
Which is absolute, we don't want to upset anybody in finance or accounting. We don't want to wait to the very, very last moment. And it's only really important the fourth quarter because it depends on what budget year this is pulled from.
Right. So even if you did it biannually, and it ended December 31st, you're still in the same boat. It doesn't matter. It's a matter of getting it in a timely manner. So whether you do it monthly, quarterly, or biannually, there still should be a time period, whatever that ending point is, you got 2 weeks to go after that. So that doesn't change that scenario, I don't think, mathematically. But I think what we're trying to get is make sure that these guys get the data in an expeditious way, an efficient way to make judgments going forward. I think that's part of what it is. Alderman Donnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to jump in a little bit, and I'm not going to tell any other aldermen how they should do their job, but when I get a phone call that something's wrong, and we had a problem over on LeGrand today, if any of you called into customer service, they ask you a lot of questions. So I go to the site. I look at what's going on. For every phone call I get before I call customer service or the police or property standards, anything like that. So that, and the other thing that I do and I find value in, and I am retired, I have the time to do that. I'm on BZE. I go out and look. I went to the Honda dealer yesterday, which is out by the mall, which is probably 15 miles round trip for me. But I like to put eyes on things, and that's something I started back when I was at Plan Commission. You know, sometimes you really got to see the site, especially in BZE. Try to figure out whether everything makes sense or not. So, and I have gone over of my allotment, not by a lot, but I would say between $75 and $95 a month is kind of where I'm at, and it's mostly little increments. It's not the big trips. So, just want to give that 2 cents.
Yeah,
in.
and I think what we want to accomplish when we're all done with this is that whatever you drive, and it's, you know, obviously you have to do it the correct way, you should get paid for it. Balance that with having an excess of money all the time because you have these different, you know, the way, you know, some people don't turn it on, I turn in everything, that's a big difference. You know, that could be a $500 difference. So we try to have I think we should try to balance that. So if we could work on something and we could take a look and vet it some more and take a look what makes sense, because in reality, if we have to go up more, then we have to do it. Nobody should be shortchanged on what they do. But at the end of the day, we don't want, I will compare it to automatic spending. We don't want to have $600,000 in our account and ask for more money. You got $600,000. Let's just try to keep a balance, you know, reasonable balance, whatever that may be. So I think if you could write something up, and I think for your writing up, if you could just give us like metrics on when these things should be in to help you, which will help us determine really going forward, you know, what we need to do. So I think this was a good discussion.
Chairman, can I mention
Sure,
one
Alderman,
thing?
Go ahead.
So, federal mileage reimbursement changed from 65 cents to 70
I
cents?
think it was 66.
66.
Yeah, it was in that range. But
Okay,
yeah, it
so
went up by
It
a
did
couple
go
of
up.
Let's take
cents.
66 cents. But the amount hasn't changed from 500 to 500. So miles have gone down.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, over 2 years, it went
So-
down.
For the,
Yeah.
if I can
Sure.
interject, for the longest time, it was only $300 per alderman per year.
Okay.
In 2024, I raised that
Yeah.
to 500 because more people were turning things in.
And then if there is not a common pot or pool, it doesn't hurt to have certain amount every year and not have it a rollover. So we are not blocking that amount since this increase is not talked about every year. I agree with Alderman Bug that if we keep it at $100 per month, if you don't utilize by the end of the year, it goes back to, whatever amount per alderman next year.
Well, that's an interesting twist. I would say that, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we should go backwards necessarily, but I just, what I really want to do is try to keep our budget relative to what we actually spend. How do we get there? What's the path for that? So if we're going to be, for a budget of 6,000, if we're 2,000 over, it seems a little high to me. So I think our goal is to try to balance that. Everybody should get what they drive. Well, let's not have a major excess every year that might even compound depending on it. So we'll figure that out. And that could be just giving more money. I don't know if we have to go to 1,000, maybe we go to 700 or 750, whatever the case may be. But that's why it's very important for them to get the stuff timely done, so we can say, okay, here's the math. Going forward, it tells us we need to do this the coming year. So I think once we get that together, then it'll be easier to figure out if we just have to have more money, period. And we can do that,
Yes,
But again, I would like to try to do it and keeping things balanced. And if not, then we go ask for more money. It's
And
that
just
simple.
one more thing, we can also take a look at current people who are asking for reimbursement or submitting for reimbursement. We don't want to discourage aldermen going out to different cities representing our city. I mean, most of them
Sure.
will not. They will still continue even if they're not reimbursed, but it is always helpful. So
Well-
if for an example, say somebody has to go to like different cities and say they have monthly meetings, so most of it is already gone in 1 or 2 meetings. So we want the aldermen to continue to go to those meetings, which are maybe in Chicago or Joliet or wherever, and get reimbursed. I
Well,
would
and
suggest
and
that.
I know, and I will tell you this, though, frankly, I think there's meetings that we go to that we really don't need to go to. They just are. I know there's aldermen out there that spend their ward funds on stuff that's really not aldermanic stuff. So I get what you're saying, but if I don't need to go to Peoria for some ridiculous thing, why am I driving to Peoria? And I'm not saying anybody's doing that, but the point is, I've seen some people like, why is anybody going there? What is that all about? So we need to watch that too, to make sure that it really is germane to what we're doing. But I would agree, nobody should not get paid for doing an aldermanic thing going anywhere.
And especially if there are Chicago trips.
Yep.
The parking as well as driving is always a hassle. We want people to
Oh, sure,
represent our
absolutely,
city there.
right.
So,
Okay, all right, so this was a good discussion today. If you could write something up about that, and then we can look at how we're going to accomplish what we really want to accomplish, the balance, and then make sure everybody gets paid.
Great.
Okay, thank you for Alderman Bud for bringing that up. Anything else before the Finance Committee today?
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn by Alderman Bay, second by Alderman Bug. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned at 4:33.
Good meeting.
It is a good meeting.